to our next episode of Illuminating Insights. I'm joined today by Laura Powers. Laura is the CEO of the Business Agility Institute, a research and advocacy organization on a mission to bring modern, human-centric ways of working to the business world. Over the course of her career, she's held a number of very interesting positions, including engineering and leadership positions, and is living proof that you can never quite know where your next career move will take you. She's been involved in the design of electronics for space applications, aircraft engines, diapers, electric cars, and software systems at Hewlett Packard, Allegiant, Sales.com, and eBay, as well as several startups and other companies that you probably have never heard of. At BAI, Laura masterminds a series of never-ending experiments to run and build the Institute using the same modern, human-centric ways of working that we research, advocate, and share with the business agility community. Thanks so much for joining me here today, Laura.
Thank you for having me, Tricia.
It's so fun to be able to have my colleagues and my friends join me on this podcast. So it's always fun to have conversations, and I see you're joined by two of your best furry friends there that keep you calm during the day.
Or they bark like crazy animals. So we'll see if they behave themselves while we are recording this.
I choose to believe that they behave themselves. I actually left my deck door open so that my dog could come in and out, and I don't have to worry about it today.
Perfect. Perfect.
So, you work with some fantastic organizations. A lot of what we talk about on this podcast is change and how it affects organizations. Um, what are you seeing as you talk to leaders and as you work with organizations about the rate of change, the effects of change? I'd love to hear your insights there.
Um, what I'm seeing these days is a growing recognition that 2020 and the pandemic was not just a blip on the radar, but it was the opening of a new world, if you will, in terms of we've always talked about VUCA, the amount of volatility and uncertainty in the world. And there's this realization that, oh crap, it's not going away and it's going to keep accelerating. And we can't just tie a knot and hang on and wait for things to go back to the way they were. And I think it's separating a lot of organizations of the ones who have put off dealing with their organizational debt, if you will, the bad decisions that have piled up that are holding them back, the bureaucracy that slows them down, all of that kind of things is just really impacting where businesses can go now. And so I see change fatigue and I see this oh crap moments showing up everywhere in terms of people realizing that we need to figure out how to work in this. And I see grit, determination, and focus on what the future may bring, because that fast movement also brings more opportunities and more ways to learn quickly. It doesn't take very long anymore for something to go from no users to 1 million users. It used to be, measured in years, and now it's literally in days and hours for some things. So you either rise or you fail very quickly. And it's not changing, I don't think.
Yeah, that's probably true. So, I don't think things are ever going to go back to the way they were before March
No.
of 2020. And we were all together in Manhattan when that happened. It
Yep.
was really an odd sense of walking down the streets of New York, and it was empty. It was empty.
Mhm.
So, you talk about, the rate of change. Do you think we'll be able to really ever allow our human psyche to catch up to the rate of change, or is this something that we'll have to get used to?
I think there's a yes to both sides of that question. I think um, we will have to get used to the rate of change and that things will move more quickly than it moved for our parents and our grandparents. I was recently doing some research for something I'm writing for the Institute, and my idea was to use a quote from Lewis Carroll around the hurrier I go, the behinder I get. And so it turns out that Lewis Carroll wrote Alice in Wonderland in the 50s, and The White Rabbit was a commentary on how fast society was moving and how crazy the times were. And I'm laughing because that's earlier than my time on planet Earth, but my parents would agree with that. And the reality now is it's a what, probably 10,000 times more speed in our daily lives. Now, that said, I do think that we're seeing a reaction to that speed. And with it, I think there's like, especially with artificial intelligence and some of the other technologies that are on the scene, coming onto the scene, trust is going to be more important than ever. And honestly, right now, you and I are having a conversation on Zoom. And I know what your office looks like in your house, and I know what you look like, but I really couldn't tell if I'm talking to real, authentic, verifiable Tricia Hall, or am I talking to an AI image, right?
Oh, true,
And
true.
so I think trust and being able to slow down and like have a conversation where you and I are physically in the same room is going to become more important over time. So I think we're going to see some of both here. And I think there's going to be people who are like, oh, heck no. There's a limit to what I can handle. You were just chatting about the holiday you just took with your family and how wonderful it was to be disconnected from your cell phone because you were literally in places where there was no reception. I think
Mhm.
those moments will be valued and sought out in our personal lives and in our work lives, but it's going to take intentionality.
I I can definitely see that. I was actually I came back from holiday and went right to a conference, and one of the vendors at the conference, because that's, the way our lives go. One of the
Oh, yeah.
vendors at the conference actually had an AI display, and it was a female avatar, but it wasn't an avatar that was made to look in what one would think of as the model of perfection. This wasn't,
Oh,
it wasn't a cover model. It was a what one would think of as a normal female professional, and it was a full body model, including flaws on her legs with like freckles and those types of things,
ah.
and her hair moved, and I was like, oh, that's creepy, but that's the way we're moving because I just wasn't expecting a 2 foot tall woman in a box. But that's actually where we're moving to.
Mhm.
So, um, yes, it's really me in my home office. I promise I'm not an avatar. But you mentioned writing for the Institute. And some of our listeners might not know what it is that you do at the Business Agility Institute and what the purpose of the Institute is. So, would you share a little bit of that with our audience?
Sure. So the Business Agility Institute does research, thought leadership, education, assessments, evaluation of organizations who are interested in finding more modern human-centric ways of working, meaning the organizations who recognize that the business today is served by a mental model of a garden of an organic living being that you take care of and that evolves over time, and that the connections of what's in your garden really matter. And that's a move away from the last, what, more than 100 years, the Tayloristic perspective of business as a machine where you control what goes in, you control how things are done. Everything is about control, supervision, and reducing the variability. And that used to work when you were building the same Model T car on a manufacturing line over and over and over. It doesn't work so good when you're in the 21st century, you're dealing with a pandemic, and there are thousands of variables impacting your business, the marketplace, and what you can do to serve that marketplace. So in a nutshell, BAI is on a mission to help businesses thrive no matter what the future brings. As our co-founder Evan Laborn likes to say, that's the trick, is being able to thrive and helping your organization thrive no matter what walks in the front door tomorrow.
Interesting, interesting. So, customers are Fortune 500s, Fortune 100s, anybody?
Oh, so a lot. So the short answer could be anybody.
Hmm.
Uh, And the sweet spot for us tends to be medium to large size companies
Okay,
traditionally.
okay.
I personally would like to see us help more and more startups who are scaling up. I live in Silicon Valley. I uh, not so much now, but back in the day would go to meetups and talk to founders of startups, VC backed, you know, kids who are excitedly telling me about their company and that the success that they're seeing and how they have moved into that phase where they've doubled their staff this year and they're going to double it again next year, and IPO is on the horizon, and how everything is rainbow and literally unicorns. And I asked them, if everything goes the way you expect it to go, what does 5 years look like from now? And then they start to talk about putting in hierarchies into their organization and the types of bureaucracy that would come with that. And basically they're talking about recreating their grandfather or their grandmother's business as it grows. And I'm like, no, 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 you've got this beautiful agility, this beautiful way of turning on a dime when you need to. Ask yourself, how can you create a future with your business as it grows that maintains the culture and the ways of working that make you so successful now? So I'm hopeful that we see more opportunities to work with these companies as they grow up. Um,
Mhm.
and simultaneously, there are a lot of very large enterprises whose long-term survival on the face of the planet Earth is not guaranteed if they don't figure out how to move a little faster, be a little more nimble, and recognize that the people in their organization will enable them to serve their customers of the future in the ways that they want. So a little more human centricity in those super big companies would be awesome.
That makes sense. A lot of what we talk with clients about and future clients about is how they're realizing the value for their customers. So it sounds very similar to
Mhm.
what it is that you're working on with organizations. And it's how do you realize the value that you're trying to for your customers? And it sounds like when you're talking to some of these startups and to some of these unicorn style companies, they might be trying to insert those hierarchies because they don't know anything different, because
Yes.
that's what they've seen modeled and that's what they've always seen done. So are you able to see different ways that organizations can help to realize value for their customers? And in what ways have you seen them be
Mm.
successful?
So what what companies want is the paint by numbers, do this just like the company over there did this, and you will get awesome results. And it would be just like if you and I lived next door to each other. I have my garden, you have your garden, and you just look over the fence and do exactly what Laura does, thinking that that's going to create the same beautiful garden in your space. And it might, and it may not. So the way that I think companies need to be thinking about value creation is, how do we own what we do and tend to it like it's our garden, it's our organic thing that we are helping grow. And how do we create an opportunity where all the voices in the organization can be heard? Because the funny thing is it used to be that if you were quote unquote the boss, the CEO, the head of the business unit, whatever, your job was to be the strategist for the organization, to set the direction, to basically like figure it out on behalf of the organization and the customers and the people that you delivered value to. If instead you understand that all the ideas and all the solutions that you could ever need lie within your organization, if you can free up the ability to hear that and to act on it, you can create something that's 1,000 times more effective than if it all just has to be Laura or Tricia as the head of an organization figuring it out. So, and there's not one size fits all. I think about Buurtzorg, who's the healthcare organization in the Netherlands that has created independent pods of healthcare professionals who figure out what's the best way to serve their particular customers. Now that works great for them, may not work well for another organization. The cool thing is that already existed as a structure for Buurtzorg before the pandemic, but it was well suited then when if you were in Amsterdam and you were a team serving part of the Amsterdam healthcare ecosystem, how the problems you needed to solve on behalf of your customers was vastly different than the rural teams serving other parts of the Netherlands. So
Okay.
So I think it's kind of that depends. It's the classic consultant answer, isn't it? Of, how do you deliver value? Something that's important to BAI is we want to help people figure out how to fish, what fish they really like. Do they like fish? But to own that whole experience, not to be someone who comes in with a prescriptive step 1, step 2, step 3, paint by numbers, and at the end of the process, you'll have your perfect organization and ways of delivering value. You need to own that. We can help you alongside many other groups in the ecosystem.
Got it. Got it. So that makes sense because a lot of times when we work with customers too, we're like, okay, here's the model. Here's the basic strategy elements. How do we want to implement them inside of your organization so that it actually suits your needs, your desires, your outcomes, your values, your regulations, the
Mhm.
things that, we need to work inside of because almost every company that we work with has got some sort of regulatory requirement that has to be satisfied. None
Yep,
of us seem to be able to do stuff just the way we want to, whether it's, the FCC or the FDA or the banking statutes or any of those types of things. There's some governing
absolutely.
body somewhere that's going to tell us how we need to do some sort of our work.
Oh,
So we have
yes.
we have to do that. So you talk a lot about wanting to hear the voices of the team and the voices of the organization. So for some companies, that could be a lot. If you've got 10,000 or 20,000 people that work there, how do you do that? How do you hear from everyone? How do you get all of that
Mm.
data in a way that's reasonable and makes sense?
Well, on any given day, it's not possible to hear all the voices on all of the topics. However, on any given day, it's possible to hear more voices than you probably are hearing now. And there's a bazillion different ways to approach something like that. There's a story that was told uh, about Netflix and its CEO. Netflix is they're the ones who publish the culture handbook, I think it's called, known for culture, known for their people centricity. And then they also have managed to step in it pretty significantly a couple of times. And there was a point in time where Netflix was making a move from being a company that delivered entertainment to you via a DVD that would show up in your mail. And they were beginning to get into streaming. And there was some discussion about how could they like keep these two businesses moving in parallel. And the CEO said, well, we need to have both of these businesses, but they need to be separate. How do we get the voices of many people heard in an organization that can have hundreds of thousands of people work in it? I think that's a good question. And part of the answer is on any given day, on any given subject, you may not need every voice to be heard. But I would hazard a guess that more voices than you're hearing now and more diversity of those voices, meaning classic DE&I, but also levels and geographies and anything that you can think of with respect to increasing those diversities of voices is important. So there's a story told about Netflix and Reed Hastings as CEO. Now, Netflix is an organization that is revered for its culture, how it has maintained its culture as it has grown over the years. And at the same point in time, even an organization like that will occasionally step in it and have a significant learning moment. So there's a story told about Reed Hastings back in the day when they were looking to branch out from entertainment delivered only on DVDs into streaming. They had the streaming starting to really take place. And Reed felt very strongly that both of these income streams should continue to exist, but be separate organizations, separate businesses. And so he had Netflix was going to be the streaming business, and Quickster was going to be the traditional DVD and the mail business. Now, as a subscriber, you would actually have to subscribe to each of these two businesses separately. There was a separate interface, everything was separate. And oh, by the way, it costs more if you wanted to do the two. Now, I really remember a conversation with my husband back in the day when we were, we got our DVDs for our Friday night date nights, all of that sort of thing. Bernie wanted to start getting into streaming more things. And frugal dude that he is wasn't too happy that it was going to cost us about 60% more. Now, this product, though, was launched and it was a humongous flop. It was so bad that Saturday Night Live did a skit to satirize it. It was so bad that people put it on the list of the 5 stupidest product ideas of the 20th century. I mean, it was like,
It was bad.
It was bad. And Reed, at the end of it, thought, oh my God, how could we have gotten to this point if it was such a bad idea? Why was there never any pushback, never any questioning of that? And he went to his staff, he went to the people that he normally talked to and said, what gives here, folks? And they were like, you were so passionate about it, you were so sure of it, that we just felt like, you're Reed, we should go along with what Reed thinks. And it really hit him that he had created a environment where those diversity of ideas, even amongst the people who were his direct reports, wasn't always there wasn't always a clear pathway for those voices to be heard. So he introduced a concept he calls dissent farming. So if they have an idea at Netflix of something that they really want to implement, that's a big deal, the champions for that are tasked with going out and actively looking for the devil's advocates and the people who dissent with the idea to hear why it is that it's a stupid idea. And, It's better to
I
hear
love
that.
that.
It's and now they're working on in bringing that as a standard of how they work. Now, Reed wrote a book about the no rules rule or something like that, and a company that has very few rules. One of the rules is to actively look for that. And you know, to your point, you don't need 100,000 people or 10,000 people or even 100 people tell you something's a stupid idea, but you need to talk to enough people to hear, this thing kind of has a few warts on it. So,
That being able to hear those dissenting voices
uh,
and hear that, hey, wait a minute, we need to rethink this, you know, the last thing anybody wants to do is end up as a Saturday Night Live skit.
yes, absolutely, absolutely.
So that's a fantastic story. Laura, I've so appreciated our conversation today. I want to close with one final question, if that's okay. Um, we seem to be in a cycle of constant change. Our companies that we work with and for seem to also be in a cycle of constant change, reorganization, and churn. What effects are you seeing from these occurrences? And is it actually helping our companies and our customers to get better, to stay in these constant cycles?
Hmm. I would say no. I don't know that it's really helping companies right now with the amount of churn that's going on. We have a joke at BAI along the lines of who is the last person we have talked to who's been in a stable situation for the last, let's say, 12 to 18 months. Every
Mm,
person I've talked to either has just been laid off, just gotten a job, just gotten a new boss, been reorganized, is in the midst of a merger or acquisition. And often for a lot of people, it's multiple ones of those, like new boss and my job is at risk, and we're in the midst of buying 6 other companies. So the amount of churn is just unbelievable out there. And it's kind of like trying to swim in a space where something has kicked up a whole bunch of dirt and you're trying to swim underwater and you can't see where you're going whatsoever. So I think that the situation that we're in right now at some point needs to settle down at least a little bit, um, because we're just dealing with, okay, I have to build the political capital because I'm new in my job before I can really like start to make some changes that need to happen. But oh, wait a minute, something else has happened. So it's just this like hurry up, start, then get put on to hold, change course, hurry up to start, get put on hold. It's not creating value for anyone and it's incredibly stressful. Now, that said, there's some amount of, we're not going back to 1951. So
right,
there's some amount of speed that we're going to have to learn how to deal with.
right.
So,
But how do we slow the churn to the point? Because to your point, I I think almost every customer I talk to, they're in a reorganization or they're getting a new leader or they're preparing for a reorganization or they're in the midst of a merger and acquisition. So how do we create stability for our teams and
well,
our team members in this unstable time that we find ourselves in?
hmm. So the tough thing is that some of the some of the root causes are foundational to how modern society and business is set up. And one in particular that keeps hitting me is the in our lifetime, we have seen businesses start to really focus almost solely on what have I delivered for my quarterly results because Wall Street is expecting a certain thing. And so instead of having a long view of what we're doing in the next 5 years or 10 years, or Japanese companies do 50-year plans, have 50-year visions. Part of this is we need to break this. Um, this obsession with delivering quarterly results. Now, that's not something that you or I or any one person is going to be able to do, but there is a I think a call to leaders to start to and to continue to, because there are leaders out there that have a vision that is bigger than a quarter, what they're going to do in the next quarter. And they have a way of leading that is balancing that short-term delivery of results and delivery of value, because we still need that with how do we do something that is right for the business, right for the customers, and right for the employees in the longer term. And if I were somebody just getting out of school, looking at where would I like to work, to be quite honest, I would have a preference for a company that's not public. Because when the company is owned and controlled privately, there's more latitude in how do you set the strategic horizon for the business, and a lot of things flow from that.
That makes a lot of sense. So, Laura, thank you so much for your time today. I've so enjoyed our conversation. I hope our listeners can say the same. Thank you all for joining us for this episode of Illuminating Insights, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Thank you.